And what I'm telling you, Tim, and what has made me uncomfortable in the past about you, which is what I was trying to get past, is that attracts a huge right-wing audience because they want somebody to excuse the death of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd. And when you seem to excuse it with your nuance, then they go, yes!
I don't care what
finally somebody's sticking up for white people killing black people. Come on, don't tell me there aren't people in your audience that think that. There's tons of people who think that.
In today's video, Cenk Uygur absolutely destroys Tim Pool in a heated debate on the Tim Pool Show. What starts as a discussion on the George Floyd protests and the January 6th insurrection quickly spirals into a clash of worldviews. On one side, Tim Pool tries to blur the lines between peaceful protest and violent insurrection. On the other, Cenk Uygur comes in hot, cutting through the spin and hammering down with facts. Cenk Uygur calls out the hypocrisy, gaslighting, and double standards, reminding us that outrage isn't the same with the truth. So let's dive in and watch how Cenk Uygur shuts down Tim Pool on the Tim Pool Show.
So I'll give you another example. You were critical of me over my statements about January 6th, which I believe you took out of context.
Okay, go ahead.
So I made the point that trespass charges require an initial warning to anybody who's going to be charged, right? You can't allow someone to enter a public building.
But then if you just look at a right winger the wrong way, they can blast you with their shotgun. You think that the guys all the guys who are stand your ground. So I'm standing my ground, man. Are they giving warnings? They never give warnings. They just blast away.
In West Virginia, you cannot just shoot and kill a person.
I know, but you can in a lot of states.
No, you can't.
In Florida, you have the flimsiest excuse will give you stand your ground.
But the excuse has to be fear of bodily harm. It's not just someone trespassed, right? So my point with January 6th was this. My statement was, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but there's videos of police opening the doors for people, letting them in and taking selfies.
Yeah, right-wing cops who are like, yeah, go get them, guys.
Absolutely. And my argument was, there's different entrances to the building. The people who are violent and rioting should be charged. They will be charged, and they should go to jail. To what degree? I mean, there's a debate on the time frame. I mean, 20 years is probably a bit excessive. On the other side of the building, there's a video of the police opening the doors to a calm group of people walking in and waving to the cops who say explicitly, I don't agree with it, but I support it. I support your right to it, or something to that effect. And I said, those people are going to get acquitted because you can't allow someone into a building to claim it's trespassing.
Okay.
You made the argument that Tim Pool said they're stepping over broken glass and didn't know they were trespassing. I didn't. And it turns out I was correct. Several of these people have already been totally acquitted or partially acquitted due to this fact.
Okay, so again, Tim, like January 6th is different than the two cases we were talking about. January 6th, I think, is way more complicated, and I might surprise you with some of my opinions on that in a second. But if I got your description of that wrong, then my bad. Okay, and so like but again, you're like. No, that one's too complicated. You're allowed, there's plenty of nuance there, right? And so if you're saying those particular guys should be acquitted because they were actually let into the building, I agree with you.
The cops should be charged.
Yeah. And so, although it's hilarious that there are some right-wingers, and again, whenever I say right-wingers, guys, don't catch feelings. It doesn't necessarily mean you. I don't mean just you, Tim. I mean the audience, right? It could mean that there are other people in the right wing who feel that way. Well, I'm a left-winger, and I've told you 100 times about extreme left-wingers I don't agree with, okay? So in the case of the right wing being absurd on January 6th is right-wing cops let the guys into the building, and then the right wing goes...
Head on.
Yeah, and then the right wingers go deep state left wingers. No, guys,
yeah, I agree.
That's not deep state left wing. It's just a right wing cop letting right wing protesters in.
Now, Cenk Uygur is absolutely right to call out the crowd that gravitates toward Tim Pool's content looking for a soft defense of white vigilante violence. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. Just look at the data. Studies show that black Americans are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white Americans. And yet some audiences are desperate to find narratives that excuse or minimize that reality. That's not nuance, that's evasion. And on January 6th, Tim's repeated attempts to frame some of the rioters as confused tourists falls flat. Even if a few were waved in, we're talking about an event where police were beaten, windows were smashed, and pipe bombs were planted. The entire point was to overturn a democratic election. This wasn't Woodstock, it was an attempted coup. And while Tim nitpicks specific cases, Cenk keeps the bigger picture in view. The right has built a myth around January 6 to dodge responsibility while simultaneously celebrating it. Cenk Uygur's honesty here is refreshing. Cenk admits complexity. Cenk concedes when things are great, but he doesn't let that complexity become a smokescreen for moral cowardice. And that's why his arguments land stronger. He's not trying to split the middle, he's trying to be clear about what's actually happening in this country.
And people were saying they're Antifa because they're wearing hoodies. And I'm like, those are just right-wing guys wearing hoodies.
Yeah, it's just right-wing guys wearing hoodies. Okay.
Oh, but when it comes to these other stories, you get very angry.
Let me do the nuance on January 6th. So, and it relates to the George Floyd riots. So, Martin Luther King famously said riots are the voice of the unheard, right? And I think that that's definitely true in what happened after George Floyd, but I also think that there's some truth to that when it comes to January 6th, which you'll never hear anybody on the left wing say. Okay. And so I'm not 1% excusing the hang Mike Pence chants. And I think those guys are super dangerous. And I've talked about it before. I'll talk about it 2,000 times after. But for a lot of the right wing, first of all, the guys on the ground they did not, other than the leaders, they did not know that they were a plot to overthrow the American government. I think they were, and I'll explain why. But they didn't know that.
You think there was a plot to overthrow them?
Yeah, definitely. And so we'll get into that in a sec. But the guys on the ground didn't know that. They're just fodder, okay? And so they're super frustrated. So here's what the establishment and the Democrats don't understand about that frustration. It's because you guys keep lying to them, the mainstream media does, and keeps telling them, no, these politicians are honorable people and they're having legitimate debates, and let's find out what Lindsey Graham's opinion is, and let's find out what Joe Manchin's opinion is. Their opinion is, who wrote me the biggest check? Okay, so since mainstream media lies about that 24/7, and the average right-winger has the same problems as the average left-winger and the average independent in the country, which is that our wages are too low, corporate power is run amok, big business in cahoots with big government is crushing our lives. So their voice is unheard, and so they're in a rage. Now, Trump then takes their rage and misdirects it. But I understand the rage, and I understand that sometimes riots happen when your voice is unheard, both on the left, the right, the white, and black. So I'm incredibly consistent on that.
Tim Pool, as usual, gets caught up in false equivalencies and moral hedging. Sure, both the George Floyd protests and January 6 involved large-scale unrest, but let's not pretend they're the same. One was a grassroots reaction of generations of systemic racism and police brutality, sparked by the filmed murder of an unarmed black man. The other, a mob wiped into a frenzy by a sitting president lying about a stolen election. That's not unheard voices, that's weaponized grievance. Cenk Uygur's point about economic frustration is valid though. Left, right, independent, most Americans are getting screwed by stagnant wages, runaway corporate consolidation, and a political class that's more responsive to lobbyists than to voters. The problem is that instead of channeling that frustration into organizing or reform, the right too often funnels into conspiracy theories and scapegoating, courtesy of people like Trump and right-wing media. And here's some added context. According to Pew Research, more than 60% of Americans across the political spectrum say they feel the economy favors the wealthy. Meanwhile, ProPublica has documented how political elites from both parties routinely cash in on insider connections. Cenk's not imagining disillusionment. He's just not letting it be hijacked to excuse insurrection.
Now, why do I think there was an actual coup attempt? Because the coup is not the riot. It's not like they were going to take the Capitol and keep it, and then we were all going to be like, oh, I guess the right wing has it now.
Once you're in the building, you have the power. That's
right. I guess the Oath Keepers are now the Secretary of State,
the
Proud Boy guys, the Treasury Secretary. No. But here was their role that they didn't know they were playing. So guys like Peter Navarro wrote a book about it. Steve Bannon brags about it all the time. Eastman, Cheesebro, all those guys who are charged now in Atlanta wrote memos about it. One of the memos was called the fraudulent elector memo. And so the plan was We get a bunch of fake, and Sidney Powell accidentally admitted all the way back in November on Lou Dobbs' show. The plan is you get a bunch of, now they wouldn't say fake electors, they would say Trump electors, but they're not even technically the Trump electors because you have a slate of electors for both candidates, right? But the slate of electors for Trump would not go along with the coup attempt. So they had to find new random Republicans in the swing states, and they even did it in New Mexico, which was not even close, right? And these were the fake electors. And so the plan was delay the proceedings so that they cannot certify the vote. Plan A was have Pence say, I'm not certifying the vote. But Pence wouldn't do the unconstitutional thing, and he deserves enormous credit for that. And he nearly got murdered for that. Okay? I mean, that is a Republican that had significant courage. And I don't think he's ever really gotten the credit he deserves for that. Now, you could disagree with Pence on everything else, and I do, right? But I give him credit where credit is due. So he was supposed to delay the proceedings. He refuses to do it. Trump is in a rage. Instead, they get the guys to bum rush the building so that it delays the proceedings. The next part of that plan was then the Republicans are supposed to go in and go, well, I can't tell who won. There's no certification. We're going to bring it back to the states. And then at that point, the swing states had Republican legislatures. And so the Republicans in the legislatures were supposed to go, we now install the fake electors, okay? And that's a coup attempt, knowing that you lost the goddamn election.
It's actually simpler than that. They don't need to go to the state legislatures. It would be the House delegations.
No, that's the last part of the steps. When the state legislatures say that Trump won when they know he didn't win, by the way, more credit to Republicans in a second. When they say he didn't win, they say he won when he didn't. It then goes back to the House because then it becomes an open question, a political question that the House has to decide. And the House, even though there was more Democrats at the time, they vote by state, and the Republicans had more states.
Yes.
So it was actually, if you're going to do a coup, it is a logical coup plan. And they discussed other coup plans. Michael Flynn proposed rolling out the tanks and doing martial law. They had a 3-hour conversation about it. Now, let me give credit to courageous Republicans. Even Trump administration guys who I despise, the reason Trump didn't roll out the tanks is because everyone in his administration that was in the room said, we will all resign immediately if you roll out tanks against the American people.
What Cenk points out is crucial. The riot wasn't some spontaneous mob losing control. It was part of a multi-pronged, premeditated plan to overturn a democratic election. This wasn't just about crazy people storming the Capitol. It was a calculated delay tactic. And Cenk Uygur brings receipts. Eastman's memo, the fake elector slates, Stephen Bannon and Peter Navarro bragging about the Green Bay sweep, and even Sidney Powell's early admissions. Let's be clear, these weren't conspiracy theories. Several participants in the scheme are now indicted in multiple jurisdictions. In Georgia alone, Trump allies were criminally charged for trying to submit fraudulent slates of electors. That's not nuance, it's a felony. Cenk Uygur's credit to Pence is also rare and important. Pence refused to go along with the plot, even under intense pressure and real danger. That moment likely prevented a full constitutional crisis. It's easy to dismiss everyone on the other side, but recognizing when someone does the right thing, even if you normally disagree with them, is how you build credibility. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing, and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out ground news in the description down below.